Welcome, everybody, to the Old Gold Show. With you, as always, I am co-manager over at hammerandrails.com, Andrew Ledman.
And I'm Casey. What are you doing, Maryland Turdipins? Bartley, Rivals Network, Boiler Upload.
Casey was just watching the end of the Maryland-Michigan State game. Casey, one of the wildest finishes we've seen this season, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. First of all, can someone like unplug the Big Ten and plug it back in?
The
Can
offense is
we just
broken.
2 games in 2 days that
Yeah,
neither team they couldn't combine for 50 points in the first half? How many teams do we need to add to the Big Ten to be like enjoyable?
yeah.
Like
But I know this is not really what we planned on talking about, but what do you think is going on with the offenses in the Big Ten? Like, where have they gone? Is it I know part of it is that the officiating in the Big Ten just not as good. They kind of call it differently than they do in the other conferences. I think that's by design. That's what the Big Ten thinks is their identity. But like, we also just don't seem to have the athletes in the Big Ten that you're looking at on guys like Alabama and Auburn, on things like that. I mean, I know we saw Purdue play off Alabama earlier, but I just don't know. Sometimes it feels like they're playing a different sport than the Big Ten.
I mean, Michigan State and Maryland have plenty of athletes. No
That's
one that
yeah,
can
that's
shoot the
true.
ball, apparently.
Right.
Like it's definitely a lack of shooting. It is generally good defense, but just I don't know. Like things are broken. Michigan State is just a god awful watch. Um,
They're tough. Yeah.
Nebraska kind of a god awful watch. Like Bryce Williams is doing so much work to make that team even functional. I don't. There's just some teams in the Big Ten that are just joyless experiences.
Yeah.
Um,
Purdue
Including
has been a
Purdue
pretty
at IU in
joyless
the second
experience.
half.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
There you go.
It's a little
Perfect
more
segue.
biased, but
So, yeah. So Purdue lost to IU in Assembly Hall, played a decent first half. I wouldn't say they played a great first half.
up 12 at half.
Do you think they played well?
I thought they played really well the last like 10 minutes. They
Okay, so they
responded
played,
from playing poorly on the road,
yes.
which you
They
expect a
they
home team like IU who only gets up for one game a season. Like the
they
fact they responded in that way, yes, good.
they played a good 10 minutes in the first half. I'll grant you
They were
that.
up 12 at half, Ledman. Look, there
I,
is plenty to be negative about, but you don't get to make up one about the first half.
fine. Okay. The second half, however, abysmal.
Mm.
Absolutely abysmal. Purdue
Ah.
went into halftime with 37 points. Took them, I believe, 10 minutes to score 3 points in the second half. It was,
Still might have outscored Maryland and Michigan State.
I mean, everything went wrong. Braden Smith had, I think, 3 turnovers in 3 possessions. Purdue had 3 turnovers in the first 4 minutes, or 4 turnovers in the first three. Either way, like they just could do nothing on offense. And then they're allowing IU to get right into the lane and do anything they want. And that's now, I think, 3 of the last 4 games, Purdue has done nothing interior defense wise. What is going on? What has changed in the month of February?
I wrote a thing last night and I probably used like 2,000 words. And really, like, as I'm writing it, because like sometimes you write things just hoping you'll get to a spot, like
Yeah,
you have a
you're like
general
you just start
idea.
writing and you're waiting for
Yeah.
a point. You're like, I know what I want to say,
Yeah.
but I can't figure out
And
how to get there.
and then it just comes down to one sentence like Purdue exists in such this just brittle ecosystem of they need Trey Kaufman, Rin, and Caleb First to be 100% of what they can be on defense, which isn't that high, but like they have to have that because we have seen now like 4 straight games of like all time, like 20 of 22 inside of the arc type numbers.
Yeah.
Similar, like we're giving up 40, like Purdue's giving up 40 plus points in the paint, no rim protection at all. We know that exists. We knew that was a problem, but now all of a sudden Trey Kaufman and Caleb First are always in foul trouble. I,
Always, yeah.
always. 3 of the last 4 games they've combined for at least 8 fouls. 2 out of those, at least one person's fouled out. The
Has
Michigan
fouled out,
game where
yeah.
Purdue loses by 2. on the road where they're outshot from the free throw line by almost 20, and Caleb Furst and Trey Kaufman both foul out in clutch time.
Both.
And you just, it's not just foul trouble. It's now you're compromised when you're on the floor.
Yeah.
Already
It
bad
gets in
rim
your head.
protectors. Yes. And it has to. But the problem is, you should have that in your head a little early. They're dumb fouls, at
Yeah.
least like 50% of them. They're
Trey's
on
getting a lot of
rebounds.
moving screens.
And Caleb Furst loves to stick his hand in between arms after he's already lost a rebound. And it's not useful. You might get a
No.
steal out of that like 1 out of 5 times, but like
But Purdue needs you on the floor.
yes, in a way that is like because Purdue has to force turnovers and they have to keep the ball out of the paint. Like everyone wants to like it's Matt Painter, his coaches are very good. It's not like they're coy about what's going on. When they say it, they mean it. Like we can't play with the ball getting into the paint. And that's what we're
That's
seeing.
that's
And granted,
tough.
that's it's the hardest thing to do on defense, but that's why you need Trey and Caleb Furst to be able to switch stuff, to be able to be active, to get hands around. Like the Michigan State game was just no ball pressure. Part of that is because Caleb Furst and Trey Kaufman are scared of like, you know, defensive fouls, but also kind of just a mindset that and that Painter took a little bit on that hit that himself where it just we weren't prepared for that. We should have because you have to if you're gonna not be able to stop people rolling to the rim, you can't let the guy with the ball have free access to make whatever pass he wants.
Yeah.
If you have Caleb Furst standing over him going like this, you're
You
not
make him
going
a
to get
little
a clean
uncomfortable.
look to wherever you want. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Purdue's not doing that. They can't defend at the rim just in general with like a shot blocker. And now they're not turning the ball over. And it's just this recipe of making the game very difficult for a team that doesn't have the excess of talent that they had last year with Zach Edey.
hmm Yeah. It's such a strange 180 from last year where, we've talked about on this here program in the past, previously Purdue wanted you in the lane. Purdue would funnel you into the lane because, I mean, to a degree, because we had Zach Edey and we
It just
knew,
wasn't terrible if they got there. Yeah.
yes, it's like when you have a guy back there who is intimidating, who is able to block your shot and who adjusts and alters every shot that comes in, it's not that big of a deal if your guy gets to the lane. So maybe funnel is not the right word, but you got a safety behind you who you really trust. And now Purdue doesn't have that. And so we're trying to keep them out of the lane. So we want them to shoot threes. And that might work for some teams in the Big Ten. Like we talked about Michigan State, very bad 3-point shooting team. Um, and, but man, we just, everybody looks like a half step slow on defense. People are making mistakes because they're trying to get those turnovers. They're trying to, as you said with Caleb Furst, trying to get the one where he can poke the ball out after a rebound, but like it's not worth the risk. The juice isn't worth the squeeze,
Right.
and they've got to figure out how to do it. And I guess what I'm really wondering is, was it really a matter of the schedule was so much easier at the end of January, middle to end of January, versus what we're seeing in February? I mean, was this team, we talked about how their defense had been fixed. They kind of found something, they unlocked something. But when you look back at it now, was it just a matter of the schedule in January was a lot easier than it was in February? And so we kind of looked at it how we maybe shouldn't have. We saw something that wasn't there.
I mean, really good teams make it hard on you, right? And if there are cracks to be found, that's kind of what makes a team good. It's exploiting that kind of stuff. The counters you could say is, two of the losses Purdue just had. Purdue blew out Michigan in the hot
Yep.
streak early,
20,
and they beat
27 point
IU.
victory.
Granted, those games are at home. Does that help? Absolutely.
Sure.
But I they were forcing turnovers. Like they were forcing turnovers in those games. It's it's definitely a little bit just the schedule. Like that's a monster 4 game. We looked at this stretch now with UCLA coming in on Friday. Like it's a tough stretch. It was always going to be hard. I think the IU game in specific was a combination of defense not good, and most teams in the country, when your first and second player are going to have the worst game of the season at the same time, you're going to get blown out, particularly on the road.
Yeah.
And you can break into why it's happening, but the fact was that Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman we ran were not good. Not even close to good. Not scoring points, turning the ball over, just a whole lot of not good stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is not a recipe for Purdue, who we've talked all season. They're funneling their shots through like 3 or 4 guys.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really, it's if you can figure out a way as an opponent to slow down Braden Smith, you either, you force Trey Kaufman Rin to beat you, which he has been very good. He's played a great season, his best year in a Purdue uniform, but he's not really a guy who's gonna, completely dominate you and beat you on the offensive end. He'll throw up 20, 25 points, maybe 30, but I don't know. He's just not a natural, I think, dominating big man like you would think of as with Zach Edey.
I don't believe that. He's been dominant. Like he's up until the game against IU, 22 straight in like 6 straight games, shooting over 60% in those games. Like he has been phenomenal. Honestly, with even like remotely decent defense against Wisconsin, Purdue probably wins that game a lot based off what Trey Kaufman Rin was doing. The reason they were in it against Michigan is because Trey Kaufman Rin was good throughout the whole game. And then uh, Michigan State, I think the offense has been choppy. I think there's definitely some to that, but I don't put, up until the IU game, I don't put any of that on Trey. And I feel
Oh,
like,
I don't either. I don't either.
I
I'm
just
just
feel like
saying if
I think he's buoyed Purdue a lot more than he gets credit for.
yeah, I think that's right. I'm just saying if you're an opposing coach and you're looking at the starting lineup for Purdue and you're trying to key in on one guy to slow down and stop, who are you choosing?
Probably Trey right now.
I think it's Braden Smith.
I think it's a lot more, well, it's a lot simpler. Like with Braden, it's just like you hope you have a really good one-on-one defender against him, and then pick and roll coverage is dealing with Trey and Braden. So I don't think it's a. I think Trey brings Braden's more difficult when it because he's making stuff for other people,
Right.
and I don't feel like it's necessary to like leverage one against the other. I feel like they've both been really good, and I think
No,
Trey has been better
yeah, I mean,
for
there's definitely been
reasons
games where
such.
he's been better. He's been better. I just think when you shut down Braden Smith, you change the game completely on offense because when he gets flustered, as we saw in the second half of that IU game, 3 turnovers for him in the first like 4 minutes, dribbled it off his foot, poor pass that he tried to get to Trey Kaufman Wren, and it gave IU the momentum completely from being up 12 to being only down 5 in like 48 seconds.
I would say it this way: when they're both on, Purdue's pretty unbeatable, and I think Trey's been more consistently on offensively. Whether
Sure,
you want to
I'd agree with
credit
that.
that to defense or not, it's just Braden's scoring at least is been a little more up and down than Trey, who's been before this last game one of the most consistent players in the conference. I think with Braden, it's a little tougher to gauge because of how much he's playmaking for others. Still leads the country in assist rate. It's just whether it's legs or defenses making his life hell, or it's getting very concerning how much Caleb First is being ignored on offense. And that makes Braden Smith's life difficult because he's playing 5-on-4 now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do think the legs have something to do with it. I mean, Braden Smith is out there playing almost 40 minutes every single night. I mean, unless it's a blowout, he's not getting off the court often at all, sometimes not at all. Um, and I know he's obviously in incredible shape. I know Purdue's got a great, um, strength and conditioning coach and all that. But at the same time, he's a human being. And to give it your all for 40 minutes like that, night after night after night, that's going to wear on you. And I know we saw it from both him and Fletcher Lawyer their freshman year. They had a little bit of a slow point in the back half of that Big Ten season, where, your first year in college ball, you're playing so many more games, so many more minutes. It just kind of catches up with you. We didn't really see it from him last year. And I don't know if that's what we're seeing this year, but I don't think it can't help by any means.
Now, and like it's mental fatigue more than anything. Like when we're talking about guys being tired, it's not like Braden can't run full speed in the with 2 minutes left in the game. Like the problem is you just like you almost have to think about it. And when your body gets a little tired, you start making some mistakes or you get in bad spots that you don't mean to be. And the one thing with Edie last year, if like calling Smith an Edie merchant is insane, or
Yeah, it's
thinking
dumb.
his assist numbers are based off Edie. But what you can say reliably about all four other guys, there were times and possessions, and quite a few possessions, where they didn't have to do much in terms of
No,
physical or mental exertion because
no,
they're just like
they just had
Zach
to stay
Edey's
out of the
down
way.
there. Yeah. And so like that, if you're talking about what's easier for Braden compared to like or what's harder this year than last year, is now the team looks at him like, hey, we have the ball. You need to do something, please. Because even Trey doesn't in the same way Edie did, just because Edie's once in a generation.
Right.
So like there's never and that was what I found encouraging about the first half and why I thought Purdue played really well. It was guys around Braden and Trey that got hot, that had the ball moving, that
Yeah,
were making shots.
that's true.
And seeing that is like, that's great. That's what Purdue needs. And then just to have that shut off, everything shut off in the second half, which I do think there's probably a conversation to be. I think I use like this version of I use in Purdue's heads.
What do
I
you mean?
think with Woodson, he has had big guards, NBA
Sure.
bodies, athleticism, and it's
It's really
very
worked out for
clear.
them. It's been greatly successful.
It has against Purdue though, and
Oh,
I think
sure, but
part of it, like 4-4 compared to no wins in the
no,
previous
no,
regime.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
more to it than that.
yeah. But it's just, I would imagine it is emotionally and physically and mentally frustrating to go up against a team like that who plays harder and better against you, who plays more physical against you. And it's not, I get the ref conversation is annoying. There is physicality that IU has gotten away with consistently over the last few years against Purdue.
How
And that
about,
is,
I mean, how about kicking or Caleb first in the crotch?
yeah. But even away from that, that's a weird thing away from the play. But like every possession, like Rice and Leal are playing defense by like hitting the arm of like a Purdue guy as he's dribbling. Nothing's called. They're banging into him off the ball. Like that gets frustrating, especially when you're anticipating already that you're not going to get the call.
Right,
And
because
that's
you're
on
going
Purdue.
into Assembly Hall.
Yeah. That's on Purdue to not be mentally tougher than that and play through it. And I thought they did in the first half. And that's kind of what Painter said after. He was like, their ball pressure didn't bother us in the first. We did 20 minutes of, and it did bother them for the first, 8 minutes. Like then they run in that stretch late, but then the second half, it just seemed like once again a frustrated Purdue team, a team like Purdue killing Purdue again, and it was
Yeah.
I think it was just kind of in their head, and like once it started to surface there real quick, like the second turnover of Braden Smith, I thought he got fouled, and it was one of those where it didn't seem that particularly close. Arm kind of got lodged inside of his, and the
Hmm.
ball gets away, and all of a sudden it's a layup, 7-0 run. and it's just like it's all downhill from there. It's not good that those things get in your way. Uh, but like it is like it being an excuse worthy of being an excuse is not taking away from the truth of it if that is what's happening.
Yeah, yeah. I think so often when you talk about officiating and how it impacts games, people look at you as if you're a whiner, as if you're saying that's the reason we lost. No, I mean, the officials have not caused Purdue to lose any of the last four games. The officiating has been bad, and the officiating impacts teams both ways. When I think the common conception or the common belief in the Big Ten is that these officials are bad. They are bad for every team. They are bad every game. And Purdue fans, Big Ten fans want consistency. And, when we see bad officiating, it just gets frustrating because you don't, it's not nearly as bad in other conferences, I feel like. You have guys who work mainly in the Big Ten or mainly in the ACC or the SEC or what have you. And it seems like the guys the Big Ten gets are just not as good. And that's frustrating because for decades and decades, the Big Ten was the basketball conference. And now we can't get the best officials.
The best. Best is such a
I
strong
mean, it's
word.
all perception. I'm not saying it's reality, but there was a reason there was the Big Ten ACC Challenge.
The
And
Big Ten
because they were
certainly
the,
has enough money to hire
oh, yeah,
80 refs at once.
exactly. And they're just not doing it. So,
I yeah, I think it speaks. I find it more interesting in the sense of I think that is a part of the mental and emotional makeup of this team in a way that's not good. Um, because like I think there was a born toughness from Zach Edey. Uh, I think what I'm watching right now on a Purdue team is a team that I don't know exactly where their joy comes from. It doesn't look like basketball's fun right now. I think I mentioned this to you right before the winning streak started that we're at Purdue practice and all of a sudden it's like, oh, they look like they're having fun today.
yeah, you did. You did. I
And it was
remember
an
that
energy I
text.
hadn't seen. And then they ripped off 11 of 12 wins. They're not looking like a team that's having fun right
Well,
now.
it's so strange because to me, you would have thought that last year wasn't fun because it was so it felt like it had to happen. There was so much pressure because you come off losing to the 16, you get Zach Edey back. People are like, "This is it. You have to do it." There's so much pressure. So to me, you would have felt like last year would have been so mentally draining and not fun. But you go to those games, everybody out there, there was John, there was yelling, but they had fun. They really did. I mean, just look at Lance Jones every single game. He was the epitome of that.
Yes.
And now
And
he's not here. There's no guy like Lance Jones on this team.
100%. Like, as far as like energy guys goes and like never serious and like always fun, Lance Jones way up. Zach Edey, the best combination of mean on the court, solid on the court. So like he takes the pressure away, an incredible giant goofball off the court. Like just a goofball. And like in the best way. And then you're talking about Mason Gillis, who's just like this solid dude leader. Ethan Morton, who is like a backbone holding all these
Yeah.
pieces together. That is a lot to lose. And, we had some conversations, I think, early in the season. Like, I don't know what a team led by Fletcher and Braden, especially Braden, who's like a little bit more prickly, a
Yeah.
lot more yelling of a teammate. And
Oh
like that's
yeah.
worked. It's worked at every level. But like you need some more balance. And there's a lot of just real polite, quiet guys on the team. And you wonder about the makeup, just like, do they just need like a Lance Jones personality, some of those younger guys to like because I think they'll get there,
Break
but
out a
like
little
there's
bit.
yeah, it's just like there's so much like basketball needs to be fun and you need to be out there
Yeah.
and you need like that kind of energy helps you through some of these tough spots. Doesn't mean they can't find it again. Doesn't mean like they won't have some there. Like they're lucky to have younger coaches who I think do a good job of instilling some of that in the guys. I just think there is a human level that like if I'm looking at anything in these last few games, it's like who's going to step up and who's going to figure that out and who's going to provide some of that because seasons get real long and losing streaks make it
Yeah.
feel even longer.
Yeah. Yeah. Two things before we go to break. One, uh, I think your point about Braden being kind of like a yeller and a tough teammate is true. One of my enduring memories of being at that Elite Eight game last year, sitting down on the court, Smith just comes right to where I'm sitting, and somebody on the Purdue squad was basically right next to him, and he's just yelling at him. He's like, over there, like get out of my way, just
Yeah.
like yelling right at, and finally the guy just crosses the court, and then he gets into his action, and you do see that like tenacity from him when he's out there on the floor. And the other thing, you talk about this Purdue team really doesn't look like they're having fun. It reminds me, and this is a wrestling reference, when Shawn Michaels came back and he's like, "I lost my smile,"
Lost my smile.
and then he came back and wrestling was fun again for him.
Mhm.
And maybe it's just as simple as that. These guys got to find a way that, basketball is a fun game. It's a
Yeah.
game. I know it's serious. These guys are getting paid now. They're going to school at the same time. It's a lot of pressure to live up to going to the national title game last year, but they still got to find a way to have fun, and I hope they can do it as they return to Mackey on Friday to take on UCLA. First time UCLA's been in Mackey since 1969, I believe. So that is pretty cool. But we're going to take a break, come back, and talk about how